So I don't know if you need an introduction, but this is Lorenzo. He is going to tell you about Illinois military monuments, and that's about all I can tell you. So I'm going to leave it up to you to go from there, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, I'm a major. I'm a retired major with the U.S. Army. I did active duty, reserve, and National Guard. I did about 21 years, plus or minus a few months here and there. And currently, I work for juvenile probation, where I'm a supervisor for electronic monitoring. Um, and at one point, I always wanted to write a book about monuments. I love history, as most of us in the military do. So finally got the chance to carve some time out of my schedule and write this book. So without any further ado, we'll roll right into it. And I'm going to show you some slides because they're a lot nicer than watching me talk the whole night. So there we go. Okay, so why write this book? Well, there's two primary reasons why I decided to write this book. First of all, was because so many monuments, in actuality, have disappeared. Some of them we don't ever hear about. Some of them we hear about, again, getting removed in the middle of the night, et cetera, and so on. The other reason, so in order to preserve them, it was just a great way to help preserve them was by taking photos. And then obviously me being a historian, I love history. So I tried to put more into the book as far as the history of surrounding that monument, as opposed to just telling about the monument and how much it weighs and what it looks like, et cetera, and so on. So the other reason I wrote the book was as a constant, to keep veterans on the forefront, because all these military monuments obviously are towards veterans, right? And also because just by creating a book on monuments, basically it was honoring our hometown heroes from Illinois. So the first one here, must have flipped on accident, is the 1969 in Bloomington. There was a monument erected in the center of Franklin Square. It was to commemorate the McLean County citizens who died during the Civil War. Over the years, the monument began to disintegrate, and a committee was created in order to fix a monument. But unfortunately, the material of which the monument was made was constructed so perishable that the entire monument was in danger of collapsing. And as you could see, if that was to fall, it could potentially hurt someone. Former Governor Joseph Pfeiffer lobbied for the city to take down the monument and build a whole new one at a different park in Bloomington. The park is Miller Park. The lower half of the monument was saved. So the part you see there with the four statues, that was saved. And it currently stands in the Bloomington neighborhood of Briarwood. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Elmwood Park, but Elmwood Park used to have a tank on Grand Avenue and Avenue of the Flags. It was a World War II U.S. Army M3 Stewart tank. And it sat on the corner. Well, they had it from 1947 to 1998. In 1970, it was moved to the Circle Center, which is basically Elmwood Park's downtown area. In 1999, for unknown reasons, I was never able to get an answer as to why, it was sent to the Kenosha Military Museum, and it was replaced by an artillery gun, which still sits there today. The first Regimental Armory. This shows the photo of the Armory as it was known at the time in the Illinois National Guard. It was eventually also renamed the 131 Infantry Armory. It was located at the northwest corner of South Michigan Avenue and East 16th Street. It was built in 1891 and unfortunately demolished in 1967 for various reasons. It fell into disrepair. It just cost more to keep it operating than it would just to build a whole new armory. The 1st Infantry Regiment of the Illinois National Guard was mustered into federal service in April of 1917. In October of 1917, it was redesignated the 131 Infantry and assigned to the 33rd Division. On May 30th, 1918, the division arrived in France with the 131st attached to them. They participated in the Somme and Meuse-Argonne offensives between August and November 11th of 1918. On June 6, 1919, they were demobilized at Camp Grant, which also no longer exists, and reorganized as the 1st Infantry Illinois National Guard. On December 31st, they were finally redesignated for once and for all as the 131 Infantry and assigned permanently to the 33rd Infantry Division. On the left, you see a postcard of the old Fort Dearborn. Obviously, that's not like the real Fort Dearborn. It was recreated, and we'll talk about that in a second. The memorial on the right is all that is left of Fort Dearborn. The memorial commemorates Fort Dearborn as it was built in 1803 beside the Chicago River and burnt down in 1812 during the War of 1812. A second fort was reconstructed on the same site in 1816, and in 1937, the fort was finally decommissioned. Parts of the fort were lost to the widening of the Chicago River in 1855 and the fire in 1857. The last vestiges of Fort Dearborn were destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. The memorial, which you see, it sits almost at the exact site where the fort originally stood. The postcard, as we talked about earlier, depicts the 120th anniversary of Fort Dearborn, right at about the War of 1812. Century of progress during the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. Soldiers Monument in Galesburg was dedicated on October 7th, 1896 for the Civil War soldiers in Galesburg. It was dedicated in Mount Hope Cemetery. If you look at the top left picture, there's no soldier on top of that yet. That's because the date was set and the show must go on. And the guest speaker was Robert Todd Lincoln, son of President Lincoln, and also himself a Civil War veteran. And he gave the speech, obviously, in front of the pedestal, but with no statue. He was not able to reschedule, so the decision was made to go forward. The sculpture was eventually placed, and that's the picture on the right. And as you can see, there was a large crowd to help dedicate this monument. The Peoria Civil War Monument, otherwise known as the Shaft, it was dedicated on October 11th, 1866 to the over 600 Peoria County Union Civil War soldiers who gave their lives to preserve the United States of America. This monument may have been the first of its kind in Illinois and perhaps one of the first of its kind in the nation. It stood on the courthouse lawn for 96 years before it was dismantled in 1962 to make way for a new courthouse. On October 12th of 2019, a remembrance celebration was dedicated and held at the Springdale Cemetery in Peoria on the bottom right. It is located just inside of the cemetery entrance on Prospect Road. So you see there's a period there from 1962 to 2019. You say, well, what happened to it? Well, if you look at this picture, those two gentlemen on the top right, they are in the process of taking it apart. And then if you look at the picture on the left and the picture at the bottom, you see what happened to it. Instead of being stored in a climate controlled facility, it actually just got dumped in one of the local forest preserves with the intention of moving it to a facility eventually. 55 years later, it had not been moved, and it was found in 2017 by a group of local historians who were able to come up with some of the pieces that had survived, but many of the pieces either had been used for other things or just disappeared. If you look at the monument, at the top is an eagle perched on the top of the monument. Traditionally, that type of eagle is known as Old Abe, and that was basically because several of the Civil War units used to call their eagle mascot Old Abe. So that's what that. So Old Abe actually disappeared. I mean, I don't know if it ended up on somebody's lawn or where it ended up, but he disappeared. The amazing thing about it is that the original um, quarry and the original company that manufactured the pieces still existed. So they were able to recreate the pieces that were missing to the exact specifications of of the 1866 version. So although there are new parts to it, they are recreated exactly as it was in 1866. Combined Joint Task Force Phoenix. Uh, it was this particular memorial was dedicated at Camp Phoenix, just outside Kabul, Afghanistan, on August 29th, 2009. You say, what is an Illinois monument doing in Kabul, Afghanistan? Well, um, it, it was dedicated there because at the time, the 33rd Infantry Brigade was based out of Urbana, Illinois. Um, Over 43 soldiers, including French, Latvians, 3 Afghan interpreters, 36 Americans from different components and states. 18 of them were killed. Out of the 43, 18 of the killed were from Illinois. More than 90 others were wounded. This particular monument shows the names of all those that were killed. It sat in Afghanistan until 2016 when the base was closed. And when it was closed, luckily, someone had the foresight to actually pack this up because the 33rd wasn't there anymore. It was a different brigade from a different state. So someone had the foresight to actually pack it up and ship it to the current brigade headquarters. And that's where it sits now, is at brigade headquarters. The 33rd Infantry Brigade served in Afghanistan from 2008 to 2009. The overseas deployment to Afghanistan of nearly 3,000 Illinois National Guard soldiers from 30 units across the state was the largest in the state's history since World War II. The 33rd Infantry Brigade was awarded the Joint Meritorious Unit Award. Illinoisans have served in our state and nation for nearly 300 years. Under the French, Kaskaskian residents participated in the first militia muster on May 9th, 1723. From 1778 to 1779, Illinois militia joined Colonel George Rogers Clark and fought the British, contributing to the victories of the American Revolution. Captain Abraham Lincoln enlisted during the Black Hawk War, becoming a member of the Illinois militia on April 21st, 1832. During the Civil War, 259,000 Illinoisans volunteered in the militia to serve. In 1918, Colonel Otis Duncan became the highest-ranking African-American soldier in the entire American Expeditionary Force during World War I. In 1942, 325 men from Company B, 192nd Tank Battalion suffered severe hardships as POWs at the hands of the Japanese during the Bataan Death March. As many of you may not know this, but that unit was from Maywood, Illinois, and we'll talk a little bit more about that unit as we go along. During Korea, we mobilized individuals to fill units that needed filling. During the Gulf War, during Vietnam, we only sent one unit, and when I say we, I mean the state of Illinois only sent one National Guard unit to Vietnam, and that was the 126 Appliance Services. During the Gulf War, we sent the 233rd Military Police Company and a couple of transportation companies. During the Global War on Terrorism, which is still going on, National Guard and Reserve units are continuously still being activated and deployed. Peacekeeping missions. We've been doing peacekeeping missions from the Illinois Guard and Reserves for easily the last 40 years. And Illinois Guardsmen have earned 113 Medals of Honor. If you look at the picture, it's got a World War I veteran, and I know it says World War II. I just caught that myself. But it's got a World War I veteran, a Boy Scout, and a Civil War veteran saluting during Decoration Day, which now is known as Memorial Day. To me, that picture was somewhat striking and indicative of how luckily we're able to transfer that pride and love of our country from one generation to the next. This is the monument that sits at Baton Park in Maywood. It shows you that 593 members deployed to the Philippines. 328 did not return. They had one of the highest casualty rates of any unit to ever serve in the military overseas. George Rogers Clark was an American surveyor, soldier, and militia officer from Virginia who became the highest ranking American patriot military officer on the northwestern frontier during the American Revolutionary War. He served as a leader of the militia in Kentucky throughout much of the war. He is best known for his celebrated captures of Kaskaskia in 1778 and Vincennes in 1779. During the Illinois campaign, which greatly weakened British influence in the Northwest Territory. The British ceded the entire Northwest Territory to the United States in the Treaty of Paris of 1783, and Clark has often been hailed as the conqueror of the old Northwest. Clark's major military achievements all occurred before his 30th birthday. Afterward, he led the militia in the opening engagements of the Northwest Indian Wars. However, he was accused of being drunk on duty. He was disgraced and forced to resign. Despite his demands for a formal investigation into the accusations, it was never investigated. He left Kentucky to live on the Indiana frontier, but never was fully reimbursed by the Virginia government for his wartime expenditures. Remember, back then, if you had some money, you could raise a militia and you can go fight and become, gain fame and glory and all the benefits that came out of that. Well, but you had to have the money to fund that militia. In theory, the states were supposed to reimburse you. In his case, and in many people's cases, they never did get reimbursed for their wartime expenditures. During the final decades of his life, he worked to evade creditors, suffered living in increasing poverty and obscurity. He was involved in 2 failed attempts to open the Spanish-controlled Mississippi River to American trade. He eventually suffered a stroke and the amputation of his left leg. He became an invalid. He was aided in his final years by family members, including his younger brother, William, one of the leaders of the Lewis and Clark expedition. He died of a stroke on February 13, 1818. For those of you who've seen the flag of Illinois, that's the year that Illinois became a state in the Union. Colonel Otis B. Duncan. He was an officer in the United States Army. He was the highest ranking African American in the American Expeditionary Forces at the end of World War I, serving as a lieutenant colonel in the 370th Infantry Regiment. Illinois paid for the training of an all African American regiment within the Illinois National Guard. This unit was organized in 1870 and was the Illinois Infantry, the 8th Illinois Infantry. And if you look at the picture on the left, that monument to this day still stands in Bronzeville, which is a neighborhood of the Chicago southeast side, and it honors the 8th Infantry. Duncan entered the Illinois Guard in 1902. He was assigned to the 8th Illinois. He was commissioned as an officer. When the 8th Illinois was called into national service during the Pancho Villa expedition in Mexico in 1916, Duncan served as a major on the regimental staff. After the American entry into World War I in April of 1917, the 8th Illinois, still on national service during the Mexico expedition, was renamed the 370th Infantry Regiment. It was the only African-American regiment to go into the American Expeditionary Forces while retaining most of its African-American command structure. Duncan was awarded the Purple Heart and the French Croix de Guerre for gallantry in action. After the war, the 370th Infantry reverted to its pre-war status as the 8th Illinois, and Duncan was promoted on March 18, 1919, to the rank of colonel, and he commanded the regiment. Colonel Duncan retired as the head of the State Education Bureau in 1929. Most of you nowadays might know that as the Illinois State Board of Education. And that's the thing about guardsmen, you know, they normally have a career in the military, but they also have a career outside the military. And so in Colonel Duncan's case, he was an educator. Lieutenant General Milton J. Foreman was born in Chicago. He was a hero of the Spanish-American War, the Mexican border service, and World War I. In the Spanish-American War, he enlisted in the Army as a private in Troop C, 1st Cavalry on December 5th, 1895. He worked his way up to the ranks until he became a captain. In the Mexican border service, he was a colonel commanding the 1st Cavalry Division of the Illinois National Guard. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for bravery in World War I while serving in France. What did he do, you may ask? This is what he did. Now, remind you, he was a colonel. When his unit came under heavy artillery and machine gun fire, he crept through the German gunfire, laying out telephone wires so that he could tell his artillery where the enemy had its gun positions. Foreman found the enemy gun positions and directed his artillery to lay down a barrage of shells to destroy them. I guess that's one of those things where you don't ask your men to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Over his career, General Foreman was awarded for bravery the Distinguished Service Cross, the Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star citations, French Legion of Honor, and the Belgian Order of the Crown. During World War II, he was honored when a Merchant Liberty ship was named the SS Foreman. He was promoted to Brigadier General on June 23, 1920, and Major General on March 19, 1921. Upon his retirement in 1931, he was promoted to Lieutenant General. General Foreman was one of the organizers of the American Legion and was elected chairman of its executive committee at the Paris caucus at which he represented Illinois. Every year, the American Legion in Illinois actually has a ceremony at his gravesite on his birthday. Colonel John Hardin. He was a representative, a U.S. representative, and a militia general from Illinois. He served in the Illinois militia during the Black Hawk War of 1832. He was a brigadier general in command of the Illinois Mormon War in Hancock County in 1844. For those who don't know, the Mormon Wars were basically exactly that. There was a group of Mormon, Latter-day Saints is also how you might know them, that were trying to establish a community in Illinois. Well, you know, sometimes people being how they are, they thought they were weird. They thought they were different. They don't want them established in this community. So open warfare actually broke out. So much so that they had to send in the Illinois militia to break that up. He eventually, Colonel Hardin eventually attained the rank of Major General. He was appointed the prosecuting attorney of Morgan County in 1832. He served as a member of the Illinois House of Representatives from 1836 to 1842. He was co-editor and founder of the Illinois newspaper in Jacksonville in 1837. I know, this young man did a lot. He was credited with helping to avert a duel between Abraham Lincoln and State Auditor James Shields. Can you imagine how that could have turned out? In February 1844, he was present on the USS Princeton when one of its guns exploded. He helped manage the aftermath and remained on the ship literally for another week after everybody was pretty much evacuated in order to continue managing the aftermath. He recruited the 1st Regiment, Illinois Volunteer Infantry, of which he was commissioned a colonel for the Mexico service. Unfortunately, on February 23rd, 1847, he was killed at the Battle of Buena Vista. That's the picture on the left, after attempting to lead a charge against a Mexican battery. The outpouring of grief over his death was so immense that his funeral procession was attended by over 15,000 people. 15,000 people in 1847. That's just a huge number. He was interred at the city cemetery in Jacksonville, and several counties are named in his honor. He was 37 years old when he was killed at the Battle of Buena Vista. Abraham Lincoln, he was an Illinois state representative, a United States congressman, the 16th president of our nation. He served as a captain in the Illinois militia during the Black Hawk War in 1832 and Rifle Company of the 31st Regiment Militia of Sangamon County, 1st Division. Lincoln never saw combat during his tours. However, he was elected as the captain for his first company. He was also present after several battles had taken place, where he helped bury the dead militiamen. On June 26, 1832, the morning after the Second Battle of Kellogg's Grove, his company arrived at Kellogg's Grove to help bury the dead. Lincoln assisted with the burial and later made a statement about his service. He said, "I remember just how those men looked as we rode up the little hill where their camp was. The red light of the morning sun was streaming up on them as they lay head towards us on the ground. And every man had a round red spot on the top of his head about as big as a silver dollar, where the Redskins had taken his scalp. It was frightful. It was grotesque. And the red sunlight seemed to paint everything all over." This gives you a little insight to Lincoln and, during the Civil War. I don't know how many people don't know, but every evening he expected the casualty counts for both the Union and the Confederates. To him, we were all Americans, no matter what side you were on. And to him, it should have been one Union. So he took great pains in the number of Americans that were being lost from day to day. But that's how committed he was in keeping the Union preserved. The picture on the right is a story. It's actually from a story about a Potawatomi who ended up accidentally coming onto his camp. And so his men obviously wanted to exert some justice after they had just gotten done burying a bunch of their dead comrades. But Lincoln refused to let them harm him at all. Basically, I mean, this story was to illustrate the qualities of Abraham as far as honesty, courageousness, and competent leadership. His men were so adamant about trying to kill this Indian that eventually weapons were drawn, and after a few minutes, cooler heads prevailed, and they allowed the Indian to leave their campsite. The statue on the left actually still does stand in Dixon, Illinois. Colonel Robert R. McCormick is shown in his World War I uniform on the left. He was a force of nature in politics and just everyday Illinois business for many decades. He was the publisher of the Chicago Daily Tribune, the founder of WGN Radio in 1924, and the founder of WGN TV in 1948. WGN stood for the world's greatest newspaper, which was the slogan, and still is, the slogan of the Tribune. On the right, you'll see a picture of Colonel McCormick. He's inspecting equipment of the 1st Illinois Cavalry. He remained active with the Illinois National Guard until his retirement. But his time in World War I, assigned to the 1st Infantry Division, left such a mark on him that he took his property, which was known as, it is now known as Cantigny Woods, and turned it into the Cantigny Woods Military Museum and Conference Center west of Chicago. If you have never visited that property, you really should. There's a beautiful array of botanical gardens there. They just renovated it. Just amazing, his love for the 1st Infantry Division and what he transformed his own personal estate into. Here we see veterans from the 134th Illinois Infantry. They're assembled in Chicago in 1885 to remember their fallen. So the 134th Illinois Volunteer Infantry, under the command of John C. Bigelow, was one of those 100-day volunteers. Okay, they were called the 100 Days Men. They were among scores of regiments that were raised in the summer of 1864 in an effort to augment existing manpower for an all-out push to end the war, technically within 100 days. So basically, it was Lincoln's surge, right? We all heard the term surge during Iraq and Afghanistan. It was the surge. As we know, it didn't end 100 days in 1864. The war went on for a little while yet. So these men who believed they were joining for 100 days ended up staying well past their 100 days. Regardless, here they're seen remembering their deceased brothers. On the left is the grandsons of Veterans Pioneer Squad. So they were literally grandsons, and the eligibility was for you to be a grandson of a Mexican War, Civil War, or Spanish-American War veteran. Well, as you can imagine, eventually that criteria starts to dry up. So what happened was the VFW eventually came across these photos, and most people had even forgotten about this particular veterans organization. And so they had a monument built in 1949 in order to commemorate the grandsons of the Veterans Pioneer Squad. That monument on the right sits at the corner of West End Avenue and Austin Avenue in Chicago's West Side. I worked on the west side of Chicago for about 10 years, and I'll tell you, I probably drove past what I didn't know this was at least 3 dozen times, but I always thought it was just bushes because it was completely overgrown. And then one day I drove by and I was like, hey, when did they put that monument there? And I pulled over, took a look at it, took this picture. But not only were the grandsons of the veterans forgotten about, eventually this monument was forgotten about. And thank goodness somebody, maybe it was the landscaper, realized, hey, behind all these bushes is a monument. So the last time I drove by, it was still nicely on display like you see it now. In 1918, Third Liberty Loan Parade in Rockford is what is pictured here. A Liberty Bond or Liberty Loan was a war bond that was sold in the United States to support the Allied cause in World War I. So not much different than savings bonds now. It became a symbol of your patriotic duty. You know, you worked, you got paid a certain amount, you put a certain amount of that into Liberty bonds to help the war effort. Eventually, it became such a popular thing that, as you see in the pictures, retired military and civilians and veterans started doing parades to encourage the buying of the Liberty bonds. So eventually, these parades were credited with boosting a lot of the proceeds. World War I veterans from Sterling and Rock Falls are assembled in 1933, this photo, to establish the Rock Falls Sterling American Legion post. The United States sent 4,734,000 soldiers and sailors to Europe and suffered 116,000 deaths, according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Records from the Illinois Office of Adjutant General list more than 351,000 Illinoisans who served in the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps during World War I, and about 5,000 of them died. 1 out of every 12 enlistees in the Army was from Illinois. That's almost a staggering number when you think about it. 1 out of 12 enlistees was from Illinois. The 126th Appliance Services Company, we briefly talked about them. The gentleman on the left side of the picture, as you're looking at it, they are the Vietnam veterans that took this unit to Vietnam. And for years, the unit was disbanded and the colors were furled and put away. And then in 2016, the unit was reactivated and brought back into the Illinois National Guard. On the right is the first sergeant of the new unit, and they're commemorating the reactivation of the unit. The 126th, as is customary with the military, did receive the honors and streamers of the Vietnam veterans. We talked about, 114 Illinoisans receiving the Medal of Honor. This is one of them. James William, also known as Jim Robinson Jr. He was born in Hinsdale, Illinois on August 30, 1940. On April 11th, 1966, he earned the Medal of Honor posthumously. Robinson earned the award while serving in the United States Army in Vietnam. He was a sergeant in the infantry and was killed under heroic circumstances at the age of 25. This is a picture of River Grove American Legion and Veterans of Foreign War members on parade. Once again, the American Legion and VFW, they're usually made up of men and women who served in many cases, the Illinois National Guard, the Illinois Reserves, and they're one of their biggest efforts is to continue to make sure that we don't forget those that have gone before us. If you want to buy the book, these are some websites where you can actually find it. Amazon, Arcadia Publishing, and if you want the autographed one, you can actually on eBay you can find it. And this is me in Afghanistan, and that's what I would look like when I would ask my soldiers if they had any questions.
So do we have any questions? Anybody? You're all very quiet.
Oh, I know. It's probably just so much information.
There was a lot of information, actually. That was really fascinating.
And that's what I tried doing with the book. I started writing the book, and I was having such a great time going on trips and meeting some of my soldiers that lived in different parts of the state and saying, hey, where you guys got any monuments around there? And I mean, I had so many monuments, probably about enough to fill 300 pages. Okay. And then one day I get an email from Arcadia saying, hey, you started putting the book together. I was like, oh yeah, I've got about 300 pictures, and they're like, well, good. All you need is about, 124 pages worth. So then I had to sit there and figure out, which ones I really wanted to use. And then I also wanted to make sure that I had a good mix of from each war period. And then of course, I don't want to put like all from one area, all from Cook County or all from DuPage. So then I also wanted to make sure that I had a good representation from throughout the state. The only thing that I tried to keep away from was having any from Chicago or Springfield, because there's a book on Chicago and there's a book on Springfield. Oh. I figured, okay, well then it's okay for me not to put much in there about Chicago or Springfield. But anyway, yeah, once I got really working at it, my next goal was to put as much historical information in there, because the Arcadia books, the way they are set up is they're picture friendly, right?
Very much, yeah.
Yes, and so I was very limited to the number of words I could have, the word count. So and then of course I had to have everything grammatically make sense, etc. I couldn't use bullet points, right? So that was probably the more challenging part, was trying to get as much history per caption as I could, and still not, maintain that grammatically correctness, So, yeah. But yeah, no, that's why I thought I was writing a history book. They wanted me to write I forget, a topical book, I believe is what they're called.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but I had a great time doing it.
I have a question for you because I thought the Bronzeville one was interesting because I've been in Bronzeville, but I've never seen that particular monument. But I
So,
have seen I think it's is it Douglas Park? There's one. It's a it was a Civil War prison. I think it's kind of between Bronzeville and Hyde Park.
so I think that one is, oh, I'd have to look at that one. I'd have to look into that one. This one is do you know where Bronzeville Academy is? So it's kind of like 39th and right about 39th and State.
Okay. Yeah.
That's roughly where it's at.
That one was the prettiest. That was
It
the
was.
most beautiful one. It's
It really
gorgeous.
was, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Very
And that,
pretty.
like I said, I tried to keep away from putting Chicago monuments in there, but that one just went with the history about Colonel Duncan.
Yeah, that was
So
fascinating.
yeah.
Could
Anybody else?
Could I ask you what the plaques behind you are, Lorenzo?
Those are well, like I said, I did some time in the military, and many of those are from different countries. So like Italy, Poland, Romania, Scotland Yard, because of different missions that I did with them or different operations that we worked on. The way it was set up, most of the European nations only did 3 to 4 months in Afghanistan. The Americans did a year. I mean, literally a year on the ground. The American Army. Then the Navy did like 4 months. The Marine Corps did like 4 months, and the Air Force did about 3. So, needless to say, I got to meet a lot of foreign soldiers, and I was the provost marshal. So that's kind of like the military version of a police chief and force protection guy, an anti-terrorism guy. So I did a lot of work with all the foreign compounds that were there. And so, for different assignments, different missions, that's what they would present us the plaques for.
It's pretty fascinating.
It's kind of neat.
That's very neat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
What's your day job?
Currently, I would say I'm a supervisor for juvenile probation, the electronic monitoring. So once again, a little challenging. There's days when I say, I should have probably stayed in Afghanistan, but overall, I'm glad I didn't. But that's what I do. And now, mind you, I've been working for the county as a probation officer for 25 years. But in 2002, I got called to active duty. And so from 2002 to 2009, I was actually on active duty. And my job was pretty much, I operated at a brigade level where we deployed units and then brought the units back. And that included my own unit. So that's pretty much what I did for those 7 years. And then when I was ready when my family was ready for me to retire, then I retired completely from the military and went back full time to the county. So I've actually been at the county since 1995, but for a little while, I was on loan to the Department of Defense.
All right. Anybody else? No. Well, thank you.
And thank you.
That was fascinating. It
Thank
was really
you so
interesting.
very much.
And tell me, is the book just called Illinois Military Monuments?
Yes.
Okay, because I want to make sure we have a copy at the library. So
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Oh, and if
Definitely.
I may, before I forget, we did recently open a museum at my American Legion post, and the address is 8664 West Grand Avenue. It's in River Grove. And if you're interested in seeing the museum, you can contact me either via email or phone number. We're not doing like regular business hours right now because most of us still work full time. But if someone's interested, we will do by appointment. And even if it's during the day, we've got a couple of guys that are retired that can open the museum and show the museum. So thank you so very much, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of your evening.
It's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.